Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Catalyst Conundrum. What is the relationship between story building and catalyzing change? What are these connections? What are we looking for? Why are we stressing it? And what do you need to do? These are a few of the questions that we are going to get into in today's conundrum. Let's get started. As you know, I love centering quotes. This is the quote that we're going to concentrate on. We've heard it before. How are we applying it? It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you knew for sure that just ain't so. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Let's unpack that a little bit. Aren't you being curious if you accept you don't know something? Doesn't that force you to be curious? So the whole idea is, how do I get curious about something? How do I realize that, oh my gosh, I don't know what I don't know? I think it was Lou Gehrig, please correct me if I'm wrong, that said, the more I learn about this game, the more I know I don't understand it. And I think that's really what we want to get at is, do we want to be an expert? And being a true expert means you have a lot of self-doubt of whether you're right or not. Or do we want to be guides? And if you place the emphasis around being an expert, then guess what? You're going to focus on what you know for sure. And you know what? In times of massive change, those for sures just ain't so. So how do we really learn what's new and available? So Walter is working on making VUCA more clear, so we're probably going to hear from him moving forward. But let's get into this, how this relates to a conundrum. What are these pictures of? Who can name these civilizations? I think on the bottom left should be pretty easy. That's ancient Egypt. The top one, for those of you who know, that's Babylon. The Babylonians, that's the Hanging Gardens. And then in the bottom right, that is the Hittites. They were the first people to do the chariot people who go around conquering people. So these are 3 civilizations. That's what's interesting is here we are 2020. These are, some of these date back to 3000 BC. So this is 5,000 years behind it. Yet we still know about these things because they left their mark and legacy. But you know what? If we plot this out in terms of a life cycle, how come they're not here anymore? Where did they go? What happened? So what's interesting is all of these are civilizations in the Bronze Age, but they never made it to the Iron Age. Something happened. Something happened in this period of time between 3000 and 0. This is all the BC period. What happened? Well, here's the interesting thing. We know as human beings, as society and whatnot, we know that an event happened. This event is called the Bronze Age collapse. And what's fascinating about this Bronze Age collapse in a relatively short period of time, remember, things had always been more or less the same for at least 3,000 years, or 2,000 years, between 3,000 and around 1200 to 1250. And then all of these civilizations collapsed in a 50-year period of time. We're still trying to figure out what happened, but the speed of which this happened, the evidence is documented. You have writing just stopping, hieroglyphics just stopping in ancient Egypt, disappearances of entire civilizations without a trace. Where do they go? What happened? There's a lot that happened, a lot of variables here. But if you go back in time and really look at it, isn't that our first VUCA environment? And what happens in a VUCA environment? Is VUCA static? Is VUCA always the case? Or is it just a turning point, a chapter from maybe one age to the next, one event to the next, one society to the next? And how quickly, what's remarkable is how quickly this happens. It's a 50-year period of time, complete collapse. Now, the recovery didn't happen as quickly. So the Iron Age, how did that evolve? And that's where we're picking up our story. What's this? You should know what this is. This is related to 1195, around 1195. So it's about a 10-year period of time that battle between the Greeks and the Trojans happened, the Battle of Troy. And what's fascinating is also that humans have actually uncovered that actually was a city that really happened. Now, did it happen exactly the way that is dictated? Probably not. That's missing the point. Applying our view of accuracy of what happened in past events is different. The fact is that we can date through carbon dating and archaeology that there was this collapse between 1250 and 1200, and the Trojan War happened after that. So we know these things. And we know that as a result of the Trojan War, ancient Egypt or ancient Greece really grew to be very dominant and powerful. And I put in a frame of reference. So this is around 1200. This is 400 years before Rome was even founded. So 400 years before Rome's even founded is when this event is taking place. So we know one of the things that I think all of us know, maybe we don't realize that this is the war, this is the battle, or this is what's happening. But I think all of us know the story of the Trojan horse, and that the Trojans tricked the Greeks tricked the Trojans into letting their thinking that they're going to go retreat. They hid inside this fort and toppled them because they couldn't get through the city walls. Okay, so we know that story, but why do we know that story? And there's a whole bunch of, if you know the whole stories behind it, we call it mythology or whatever. But really, the reason that we know it is because the Iliad. And the Iliad was actually written down eventually, a few hundred years later by Homer. But this story was told over and over and over again. And part of the reason that I'm bringing this up is that in order to capture the information that you require to deal with a rapidly changing environment. And think about the rapidly changing environment of civilizations adopting to this new world, this new world order that doesn't have Babylon or Egypt or the Hittites telling you what to do or controlling you or asking for you for tributes or whatever. There are no kings even. These are city-states that are self-governed. The whole idea of democracy is flourishing because, we don't want kings. We don't want that garbage to get us in. So there's a rejection of a lot of the old ways. So there's this new birth of new things, new ideas, new concepts. And what's great about the Greek mythology is it's really complex. It's very thoughtful. And these are the kinds of things that are born out of a state of chaos. And they manage this state of chaos. And the reason that this is a jumping off point is that we know that Jason Campbell, I forget his first name, did a study about the Hero of a Thousand Faces. And one of the things that we know now or that we use now are these ideas of how to tell a story. So story diamond looks like this. There's an entertaining beginning. Hopefully my beginning was entertaining. There's elaborative detail, like a story, critical character, setting, objective. In other words, helping people see things. There's suspense. If there isn't suspense, there isn't anything to pull you in. There's the main event or main events, plural. How many main events were there in the story of the Iliad? There's action leading to a solution or a conclusion. And then there's an ending, an extended ending, a memory, decision, flash, wish, some sort of conclusion. Now, what's interesting is what is that story diamond? What are the patterns that are related to the story diamond with the scientific method? So the scientific method, question, hypothesis, experiment, observation, analysis, and conclusion. Well, I would definitely need help anchoring this. I'd like to figure out a way to turn this into a process that isn't so rigid. So I need help mostly probably from Architect and from Detangler, but anybody participating who's a process advocate. How do we take what our process is? And we're going to pay that out later in the video. But to go through what we're talking about is we want to question, we want to hypothesize, we want to understand the situation, we want to make observations, we want to do investigation and findings. So let's cross correlate the two. What's between both of these two? Well, if you look at it, we need to be able to ask compelling questions. So a compelling question, doesn't that create an entertaining beginning? A hypothesis is the elaborative detail that behind what our quest is. The situation is laying out all the different variables of how we're actually, the hypothesis that we're testing, what is the environment with which we're in? Something that's relatable to create suspense or interest. Then we create observations. What are the categories of observations that we're finding so we can help people classify their situation that seems so chaotic? Then how do we say, okay, given the observations of the situation, let's classify the success criteria, and let's be mindful in that. Now that we have that anchor, how do we create findings and drive that through that investigation, go through the trial and error process with solution and conclusion before we get to findings. Now, what's also interesting is if you contrast this with the design thinking approach, look at this. Who can see the diamonds here? The story diamonds are in phases. So the story diamond between observing and synthesizing, you start with a really clean question, you diverge, then you converge. Now you have a prototype or a working model. Now you diverge and converge. Does it work? Iterate, iterate, iterate. Diverge, converge, diverge, converge. This is natural. And it's something that we've been doing as a species for a long time. However, this isn't business thinking. Business thinking is linear. Problem, solution, problem, solution, problem, solution. And things don't work that way. Now, part of what we're also dealing with is human beings also have expectations in what they're experiencing. There's that word again, experiencing. Why do we have to do more work to put down on paper what we mean by experiences and how broad this term is? But if you look at this structure, there's an experience on one side and the expectation. What do I expect? And then what am I experiencing? And my zone of tolerance is if my experience is low in terms of my expectations, I'm going to be very frustrated. So what we're doing is looking for the zone of how do we tolerate to keep people along in the change process, and where do people opt out and get anxious? So whether this is the right model or not, I don't know. I'll challenge all of you guys to make this the right drawing for what we're experiencing ourselves, which, by the way, we don't need to go study elsewhere. We can ask our own questions and figure it out ourselves. We are experiencing this ourselves. If we are curious and document what we see, we're going to be able to figure this out. So how do I go about doing this, and how do we manage the balance between expectations and experiences so that we manage the anxiety levels? And it's not just about our own team's anxiety levels, which is super hard, but it's also, are we producing things that manage the anxiety levels for the client? And what's interesting is somebody's got to go first. Somebody's got to be uncomfortable first. And we want to be comfortable knowing that what we're doing is what the client wants. But in order for them to do that, they have to know what the solution is. And they don't know what the solution is because they don't see the problem. That's why we have to go first with the seeing. And if we're not the ones going first, then, all we are is giving them the same result and acting like we're experts. So what we have to do is we have to recognize that there's 3 basic buckets, and I've color coded them. We have to help them see their environment, and then we show out that way. We have to help them solution what their world looks like and show them the results there. And then we have to help them figure out how to scale their environment, and we have to show what looks like there. So each one of these different things are a different question, all part sub-questions of the bigger question, which is how do I transform? So let's break this down into what I talk about often and what we need clarity on. And I'm setting this up hopefully to get you engaged and how you can help. But if you look at the story diamond, there's a start point and an endpoint. And what we need to do is we stop the start, take the stopwatch to the start watch, and then hit the stopwatch when the endpoint is. What is this duration of time? From what to what? We're building a prototype. When we start adding more and more expectations that we could do this, or we could do that, we could do this, what we're doing is we are making more and more and more expectations, which creates more and more effort and more headwinds. So the discipline that we require is to focus on what we mean by a prototype, and the fact that our challenge is to challenge ourselves to put on paper to share what we're seeing. There is no answer yet. There is no right or wrong. All we can do is share what our experiences are and learn from the team. And the way that this works is you build up and build up. It starts easy and it gets harder and harder and harder. If we're not documenting criteria, so that's taking observations and putting them into categories and stress testing those categories and synthesizing them down to 5 or 6 buckets before getting into the answer. The answer starts to get at based on this criteria, and have we collected the information and observed the environment well enough with discipline? Then we can start saying, given this environment, given these variables, we can now define the criteria of success. Now, the linear thinking model is going to say criteria 1, solution factor number 1. And it doesn't work that way. These are entirely new, different success factors. Similar to ancient Egypt ran its way, and then ancient Greece ran its way. They had an event. They had a catalyzing event. We're in business to help create these catalyzing events, which means we have to think differently with discipline. So it's going to get harder before it gets worse. It's going to put us in situations where we're sharing our observations and the like, documenting and making slides, lots and lots and lots of slides. Why do we need lots and lots and lots of slides? Because we have to get the reactions of lots and lots of people. So the goal of the prototype is really to prove that something works. The next stage then is, how do we prepare the organization? So now that we have evidence that we can show, hey, this thing works, now we have to say, look, IQVIA or Mimecast or whomever, how do we get prepared to see whether or not we can scale this or not? Is our culture set up? Is our environment set up? Is our infrastructure set up? This is where operating models get in, and we can't lead with operating models. We have to develop that. So we have to say the starting point is IQVIA would like to be able to sell commercial ratio. We would like to be able to sell a common platform. So we've done the work to make something tangible. Now the question is, how do we make it repeatable? What criteria do we need to be put in place? What are the skills? How do we break down what was done in building the prototype to make it work? Then how do we identify the success factors and prioritize them so that we can give the client a blueprint, a roadmap to move forward? And then finally, the next question is, based on that blueprint, how do we scale? What criteria is involved in scaling? Adoption is very different than what a plan is. Performance is very different than what a plan is. Hiring and decision-making and governance and all of those other factors are very different than what a plan is. In the heat of the moment, execution eats culture for breakfast, right? Or whatever. You can think about it a variety of different ways. But in the fog of battle, once the battle is engaged, the planning goes away, and now what's left is what's available. So what criteria? How do you establish criteria of what you're doing? How do you determine success factors? And then what's in state? What does scale actually look like? So we use a lot of these terms: scale, talent, message, clarity, architect, process. What does it mean? That's why we have to have discipline to be able to say, here's the criteria that we're evaluating this. So we have to create new scorecards. We can't let people score things the way they're currently scoring them, and then say, these are the factors of success. Are you doing these things? If not, then you're not being successful. So you can't blame us if it's not working. So this is this is the whole story diamond process. Prototype, help them see that it can be done. Prepare, help them figure out what the solution is. Scale, how do you help them think at scale? Prototype, prepare, scale. See, solve, scale. Okay. So let's extend out this this model. There's a start point and an end point. Things get broader, and then they stay broad, and then they get narrow. This is hard. It's also very easy. It's fascinating what happens. So what I want to highlight is, in order to build a prototype stage to resist the urge of just cutting to an answer, we have to build scaffolding around it to make it tangible, to build something new. So part of what we do is build the scaffolding. This is where I need a lot of help. I need people to ask me a lot of questions about how we set up the scaffolding, how we get it going, so that we can make the process of doing this more repeatable and definable. So here are some things that that are knowable in terms of the start end point for a prototype. There are completed stages. Software AG, Brian only. Brian can be a source to be curious about. I can confirm it. We can document we can plot out what this journey looks like. How did the criteria get evolved? What did the success factors get evolved? Then how at the end was the thing that was delivered so simple and so easy? Yet, what prevented us from getting $1 million for scaling it and make it more repeatable? Fascinating, right? We have to make sure we understand what really happens in Software AG. This is something that has yet to be unpacked, and it's now going on 6 years. I am going to be a broken record to keep reiterating that. The next thing I've mentioned before, we have the opportunity to figure out a start date and an end date with a Sales Enablement Society. We can unpack the letter for shareholders. What is the letter for shareholders here? Why is it important? Where does it fit into this picture? Then we have a lot of evidence. What is the end point that we want to put? The reality is the Sales Enablement Society had many of these triangles, but I think the end point that we want to measure is the start point. When did the Sales Enablement Society begin? November 16th, 2016. And the end point is the conclusion of the first full year of 2017, which would be December 31st, 2017. That's the end point. Those are specific dates that we can start the stopwatch, end the stopwatch. What was before? What was after? How do we compare? How do we unpack all of the things that happen? Because that's an example of catalyzing change, and it is 100% the formula that we're following or trying to follow. I need a lot of help to turn it into make it concrete. Then there are 2 examples that I've highlighted before that are incomplete. The exercise of what exactly does change mean? We've gotten maybe to the criteria. Actually, I should move it forward. We're kind of in the stage of we haven't paid out the criteria. So all of us have experienced that. What's preventing any of us to document, here's what I've learned? And then there's OmniTracks, the second day workshop with Brian Walter and I. Again, something to unpack. So I need help, but these patterns are repeatable. How do we get them documented so that we can follow it? Because what happens is the focus gets shifted. Once people get into the moment when they realize, oh my gosh, I wish we would have laid the process when we could have been doing it before, then they get focused on reactive state of where I'm skating to the end, and we don't need that. I don't need your reactive emotive state work product, because 1, I won't be able to use it, and 2 is we're not taking full advantage of what you are. The help I need more than anything is twofold, and I'm going to highlight it. I need 60% help just documenting what your understanding is from this so that we make it more repeatable the next time. And then 40%, I need you to zoom in and learn what being situationally specific looks like. So we'll get into that in a minute. But one of the things that I want to highlight, one of the things that I need to pay out that I have to work on to make more clear, And I have to do it, I'm setting up a situational thing. So please, pay attention. I'm trying to, give you some learnings and give you some tools that you can go and follow, sort of immediately. And if you put it in practice without overthinking, you're going to be able to work on it. In the last video, or in the last conundrum, we talked about and we watched the example of the backwards bike. To me, that is the perfect quintessential example of the piloting process. What Dustin did is proved that somebody can ride a backwards bike. That's a prototype, pilot, prototype, whatever you want to do. And look how much effort he put into it. Go and break down exactly what he did, because the patterns of what he did there are the same kind of patterns that we need to do. How much documentation did he do? How much observation did he do? How much did he pay attention to what his emotions were and where his friction points were? And why did it work? It worked because he tried. And if you notice and plot it out, how much failure did he have before he had success? So the video that we're going to watch together is somebody who took on a challenge. So we're going to play this challenge and we're going to watch this together, because I want to show what work has to be done in the preparation phase before we get to scale. Because I need help to unpack what happens in the prototype stage. And the more inputs I get, by the way, are really valuable so that I can help set expectations for our clients, which you're going to see situational that I have to work on. Then you have prepare stage, which is how do we prepare to make it more repeatable? So let's watch this together.
Hey Mike, it's me Destin from Smarter Every Day. I have a challenge for you. I love your channel. I love that you learn new skills every day. I think it's amazing, but I have a problem. I learned how to ride the backward spring bicycle. You turn left and it goes right, vice versa. It took me 8 months to do this, but I did it wrong. I just went to the end of the driveway and back once a day, and that took 8 months. But I can no longer figure out how quickly I could have learned had I tried really hard. I know you didn't ask for this, but I've mailed you a bike made by the same welder, Barney, that made my bike. So if you don't mind, please, will you get me the data?
So what's happening here? What Dustin has done is he's gone through the process, and it took him 8 months to learn how to ride a backwards bike. So the prototype has been built. It's proven that it's possible. He has a representative example of proving what's possible. How hard was it? He had no dimensions. He had no knowledge. He just did it. That's what we do in the prototype stage. So now, how do we learn from what we did? So how can we learn to make it repeatable? That's the next stage. So let's watch this out together and see if we can learn. Are you guys trying to be Dustin? Or are we trying to be the other guy?
I know this is crazy, but how long will it take you to learn how to ride this thing for 50 meters without falling? Please wear a helmet. Thank you so much.
So Destin said it took him 8 months to learn how to ride this bike.
So look, this guy is breaking it down. How are we breaking down what our goals are? Are each of us breaking down our goals?
8 months, Destin. Come on. How hard can it be? It's just a bike, right? So I'm going to try and concentrate that learning process into a much shorter space of time.
How hard can it be? It's just detangling, right? How hard can it be? It's just clarity, right? How hard can it be? It's just architecture, right? How hard can it be? It's just capabilities, right? How hard can it be? It's just concepts, right?
Time. So this is day 1, hour 0. Oh, God. Well, as you probably guessed, it's totally impossible.
So you can see immediately, instead of researching it, just did it. You need to just do things because you have to benchmark or create a baseline of what you need to learn. You're not going to know it by researching and trying to understand. You actually have to do it.
Right, you just ride backwards. Oh.
Trial and error.
Oh God. Well, that's a pretty quick way to break both your arms. Ah, it's hopeless. I feel really stupid in front of these people because they can't see the gear, so it looks like I just can't ride a bike. This is so far away from a standard bicycle, it doesn't even feel like a bike. It just feels like I'm trying to learn an entirely
This is so far away from a standard bike. Look at it. Does it look so far away different?
new thing. What? Oh. Oh. Yeah, right, lads. Those guys thought I was a 25-year-old man who couldn't ride a bike.
Look at the self-judgment kicking in. Those guys thought, who gives a rat's ass what they think?
All right, this is day 2. Oh. All right, that was my furthest ride yet. Oh, getting somewhere. Yes, 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 yes.
Trial and error and practice.
Yes. It's only day 2, but definite progress. Look at this. You know. When you're leaning over and falling, your brain's screaming at you to steer this way.
What's different about his mindset? What's different about the mindset of Dustin? Wouldn't you say that both of them are curious? They take the challenge on, but instead of judging themselves and saying, I know how to do this for sure, being open-minded, trial and error, being curious. They're documenting, they're making observations.
To upright yourself, but you kind of have to consciously fight that. Yes, 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 yes. Yep, 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 getting it. Come on. Jesus. Yeah, yeah. Day 3. Yes, that's something. Oh. Oh yes, look at this. Look at this. This is day 4. Getting it. I've got it. I've got it. That is definitely progress. Okay,
Do you see the positive reinforcement of being curious? Because he's documented his evidence and he's celebrating the little wins.
got it. I got it. I got it. I definitely got it. I got it. I got it. I've got it. I've totally got it.
Do you hear how enthusiastic he is?
Yes. Look at this. It's not pretty, but it's good. This is so fun when you start getting it down.
This is so fun when you start getting it down. That is the motivation that we need to be seeking instead of getting the reward from positive feedback from somebody else. That's arbitrary. You know for sure if it's working, whether this is working or not. You know for sure whether it's clicking if other people understand what architect products are. You know for sure whether it's clicking if people understand what capability outputs are. You know for sure if this is working if people understand and can use and put into action outputs from Detangler or outputs from Clarity or outputs from Conceptor. If you're just in the business of taking direction, you're not challenging yourself to figure out how to ride this bike.
So I'm trying to describe what just happened. I set up like
The other thing is the reason that this is so important, if our team isn't challenging ourselves to learn the material, then how do we know? How do I know? How does Jen know whether the material that we create is going to be useful or not? So just creating material because you're creating material, how do you know whether you're doing it the right way? We're creating material to lift the fog of ambiguity. How do you know that that's going to happen? You need to have that feeling of where the light bulb goes off. You will know whether or not you're being ambiguous or not by getting feedback from other people and seeing whether or not it works or whether it gets adopted.
past 3 days, and then suddenly, boom, something clicked in my brain. It's like someone took the wires and reversed them and plugged them back in.
You hear that? Isn't that identical to what Dustin's experience was? Boom, One day one day I couldn't ride the bike. Then the next day I could. Something went off in his brain and it was like the wires got reversed. Think about his experience and his language and what he's articulating. What words would you use to describe it? How do you do that? How do you prevent yourself from being so darn frustrated? And why don't you get curious? Why are you getting frustrated? Why don't you try a different approach? How do you create your own threshold for success? What does success look like?
It's really difficult to explain, but I suddenly have this down kinda well. So today's the day we're gonna try and do a full 50-meter run, which starts.
So now he's created the environment to test. So here's the deal. In order for this to work, he has to ride this straight for 50 meters. There is a condition. What conditions are you making to validate, to prove whether or not you've got it or not?
That's at where this bike is now, all the way over here. Go, 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 go. No, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. I'm gonna do it. We're gonna do it this time. Oh, Jesus.
Listen to all the cursing and whatever. You got to be okay. You got to find an avenue to let the frustration out.
Ah. Okay, we're good. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, we're going fast now. Going real fast. Yes, I'm gonna do it! Yes! So after Destin learned how to ride the backwards bike, he found that he could no longer ride a normal bike. So I want to find out if I've erased my memory in the same way.
So look, he's made conditions to go back and double check other things.
I want to find out if I can still do this. Right, here goes. Oh. Oh, it's like totally fine. I can still totally do it. Yep, can still totally ride a normal bike. Oh, I forgot how nice it was to ride a normal bike. Yep, totally fine. After completing the 50-meter challenge on the backwards brain bike, I still didn't feel like I completely had that skill down. I couldn't ride it as if it was a normal bike. So I spent a bit more time practicing with it, and I also got a drone. Here's some of the footage. So there we have it, that's the backwards bike. Thank you Destin for sending this out and for challenging me. It was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's plenty more on the way, so please subscribe. Thanks very much for watching.
A few days, 8 months to a few days. Now, if you're going to be like this guy, I'm going to be super excited. If you take things that I've done and it took me 3 months and you can break it down to 2 months, or even if it's 3 months and it's 2.5 months, this is the kind of progress that I want to see, and it's going to make me super excited. If you say, as long as you can go back and double check that, yes, you rode a backwards bike. Yes, you were able to overcome some of the obstacles that I've got. And yes, you were able to ride it out like this and perfect it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. You've proven that you've mastered it. And that mastery is something that we want to incorporate. So there's a bunch of reasons why we have the roles that we're doing and why we set it up that way. One of the things that Dave brought up, or architect brought up, is how do we know we're falling off the bike? And we need to talk about that. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Because part of what we have to do is we have to realize is that this is an environment where they got to set up and be curious, and I need to protect that curiosity to learn the skill. But imagine if there was a whole race, of people racing backwards bikes. Now it's suddenly competitive, and by the way, it's professional. So the stakes are way higher. The stakes, you doing failure inside our own protective glass, is we have to do it because that's the only way we're going to learn. You think that you want to get it to the client, but you're so far off from being able to put it to the client. It's still like, hey, let me show you I'm riding this backwards bike, and they need to see it look polished. So what we have to do is we have to create a lot of environment to where it's a safe place inside our group to experiment, fall down, and the like. And to think that you want direct access to the client is the epitome of arrogance. It's assuming that you know how to do it and that they have the answer. They do not have the answer. We have the answer by challenging ourselves because we have to help them see what they don't see. The reason that we've been hired is to help them cure a symptom. And if we just take their feedback and do it, we get self-confirmation bias. And that's not going to work. We have to be able to do it. That's why I have to be the customer, and you have to hone it out that way. You need to run things by your teammates so that you can figure out whether it's clear so that I can use it. That's the way that this stuff works.
I'm so excited! Right, bring it home.
Oh, Geronimo, tears keep on falling.
How funny is that?
Hey, what's up? This is Tony Hawk, and I have a challenge for Mike Boyd.
This is a bamboo saxophone. The milestone for this one.
So this guy, Mike Boyd, just sort of figures things out. That's what we need to do in stage 2. I need the process of figuring out. I need your help of figuring out what we've done here. Okay, so let's expand. Let's go through and think through these different stages. I wish I would get help. So the help that you guys could be, if you could be like the Guy Dustin challenge, I'm challenging each of you guys. How do we define what these stages are? How are we paying attention to it? Here is my words. Don't use these words as they're absolute. Don't act like I have the answer. I don't know what happens in between here. I know this is the pattern, but I can't make it specific enough for you. And if you go through this process end to end, that means completing the assignment of going all the way end to end on how to make change actually. What does change actually? How does change actually happen? We haven't finished that. It's not complete. Or doing the assignment end to end, dot to dot for the SES. That hasn't been done. Or the assignment for Townsend, end to end, hasn't been done. If we run into stages of why it's not happening, got to ask questions instead of just giving up. So the way that I see this is I see there's a kickoff stage, there's a stage of hyper engagement. So immediately what I do is I collect as much information as I can, and I immediately try to give a sales call based on the information I've got. Are you doing that? Or are you immediately saying, here's what I understand the architecture to be? Or I immediately understand, how people are thinking about this. Or I immediately understand how they're conceptualizing it. Or I immediately understand you've got to do the effort of getting on the bike in the first place to assess what you're dealing with. Then you collect information in here to figure out you have the feeling in your guts of what you don't know. And it helps expose you what your realities are. But you have to first do a lot of toast to zoom in on what the real issue is in the first place. So the toasting exercise helps you get clarity of thought. It's just not a thing to do. I'm doing it, and now what, right? It's be curious. What is in your paper? What is on your paper? How are you comparing it to others? How do you keep evolving the idea so you have one core idea that you're focusing on? Then the next one is once you get into engagement, how are you collecting the information first that you need that you can see what the problem is and empathize with it and be able to articulate it to all the stakeholders involved, and then collect the information to help show them what that looks like. Then when you do the analysis stage, you must have agitation. We avoid agitation and being uncomfortable so much. We have to flip that around and make that fun. If you do not agitate, you don't create the forcing function. The agitation is the process of falling off the bike. Think about all those different times when he kept falling as he was cursing up a storm. That is the agitation process. That's how our brains really work when we're unwiring or we're learning new things. Then we have to go into a storyboarding structure. So I've shared a video for that of what that structure looks like. How can you add in and add flesh and add meat to the bone? Because we're telling a story. That's why I told the story about the Iliad. And that's why I told the story about the collapse. It's a historical accurate thing that's been proven, but yet how do we know it? We know it because of the storyboarding. Then we have to be able to get into findings. What did we learn by this process? And notice how both of them, Dustin and the other guy, summarized each of their videos. And that whole experience was only 7 minutes. That's it. Their videos, each of them are only 7-minute videos. Okay, so how do we create what's going on in each of these things? Are they accurate? Can we observe each milestone? How do we relabel these things to where they're more clear? Does this make sense? Are we resonating with it? Are we even talking about these kinds of things? These are the things that are most important, not am I making the right slide? I gave tips on how to make slides so we actually can produce things that we can actually start reacting to so we can agitate. So let's expand here. Something that you can do real quickly is you can see each of these videos and plot out what's happening. I do this a lot. In order to learn something new, instead of jumping into my thing, I create my own framework. So each of these different videos, one is a prototype video, a prototype diamond, and then one is a prepare or limited production run video. We need to figure out which one of these do you fit in, and then what actually happens. Would we replace these different stages? I want you guys to be more like this guy. This is how I see it. Maybe this is not elegant or not the right way. I know how to go from here to here. Maybe you guys have better ways to do it that can be better articulated. You don't need to be in the business of riding the backwards bike. You need to be in the business of helping explain how to ride the backwards bike. I'll do the heavy lifting here to figure out what that looks like. So here's the situation. Now I want to get better at helping to describe the situation. So I need feedback from you guys about what works and what doesn't. So I have to manage expectations for a QV about what they're getting in the prototype stage. So we've been doing such a good job of communicating in a storytelling way. The expectations are, well, I don't know what they are. And that's part of the problem. We have to manage everybody's expectations. We need to manage expectations versus what they think that they paid for versus what they need to pay for next. We need to manage expectations in terms of scope. We need to manage expectations in terms of deliverables. And these are all things that we did not do a good job of it at Omnitrax. And we need to have documentation for it. I need massive amount of help to make the things of what's in the scope of the prototype stage tangible and not skipping ahead to solutioning or what are the things that we could put in a statement of work or anything like that. The next thing is, can you share on slides simple thoughts about what you thought solutioning is, why you thought solutioning is helpful, and why it doesn't help now? Those ahas are really great ingredients for me to help make things tangible. I just want to have a simple structure of slides to be able to capture it, which I can convert into value. I find that very valuable because I don't have your personal experiences. Those personal experiences, because of your role and your expertise, is really, really valuable because it allows us to simulate reality and make all of our content accessible. If you have the expectation, I think you need to make slides for the client, your expectations are wrong. My expectations are all along, I want videos of you reacting to things and publishing your thoughts. I can turn those into slides way quicker. My patience and threshold level of producing actual deliverables is greater. What happens in this state is that people get too absorbed about what your own perception of value is and lose sight of the uncomfortableness. the uncomfortableness of what your journal entries are, your videos are like your journal entries, help me understand what you're thinking. To not do that, and then puts a massive amount of pressure on your ability to produce slides. You're not ready to ride a backwards bike yet. I know that. It's not my expectation. I need to create conflict, and I need you to tell me how you're reacting to the conflict and force yourself to try to organize your thoughts. Think about every one of those slides as a structured way to make toast, to try to communicate and get over yourself. So the other thing that I need to do is I need to begin laying a foundation for different stakeholders to absorb what we've learned. I mean, we have to create the conditions for them to absorb what they've learned without context. Then they're going to be like, I know that already. So there's a lot of work to do there. So imagine the gaps I have to cover off for Jen and Matt. What did you think before? What did you think after? With the marketing department, who produced that constellation thing. Sales leaders, Jovan and Kevin specifically. AJ, think about Susan and all of the, all the product people. All of these different buckets and categories and the like. I need massive amount of help to be able to create the slides to manage the expectations. I get that help by you reacting to things. So here's an example specifically, as I tried to put together this video today, I got this this morning and I tried to weave it in. So this is the element of serendipity that we talked about earlier before. So this is an email, you can see forward, commercial exec engagement. The time is 10:29 a.m. today. This is just a note, and I got a text for Jen too. Any of the slides you are working on for this project, hit the mark on below. So this is a request that came in. So Jen spent 3 minutes and immediately forward. So let's just kind of break this down. Let's observe and understand what's happening. Who are all these people? I don't know who Jen Hillier is. I don't know who Amy Musolo is. I don't know who Stephanie Tatum is. I do know who AJ is. I do know who Jen Burns is. I don't know who Jonathan Deutsch is. We do know who Kevin Knightley is, who's copied on this. Interesting. Yes? Think about it. This is an email going out from a adult wallet owner. Any of the slides you are working on for this project, hit the mark on below. Let's look at what the ask was. This is the exact content of the email. Team, we have an opportunity as part of a global exec governance meeting to provide 1 page on IQVIA's commercial engagement to life sciences. This is not why IQVIA or what makes IQVIA special, but rather where do we play? Look at how broken this in on, how much thought has been put into this sentence. Room is commercial heads, so who's in the audience is commercial heads, franchise leads, data informatics, and analytics heads. BMS is very much globally oriented, so not just US, and can't be IM centric. So this is for Bristol Myers Squibb. Okay, let's make sure we're understanding the situation on many fronts. Do we have an elegant? So here's another key word, elegant. How do we make things elegant if we're not going through lots of trial and error process? 1 page, again, elegant is one thing. 1 page is something other, simple. So this is a lot of design work. Articulation of what we do at a practical level of detail. Now, look at how ambiguous that is. What does this mean? I don't think we can say we embed intelligence to commercial activities. See, that's too abstract, right? And this is, see what he's talking about, practical level of detail versus academic level of detail. We embed intelligence to commercial activities. My default would be, he's even saying, here's sort of my default thinking. Here's a header, IQVIA market engagement across commercial needs. Support, IQVIA actively engaged on building most pressing capabilities for life science commercial organizations. New commercial models, COVID environment excelling disruptor of life science commercial model. That's from us, by the way. Patient engagement, channel optimization, decision-making at scale. Support, IQVIA also supports mission-critical needs and full range of life science functions. Provide a view of each buying category, example, brand, marketing, sales ops, etc., against tailored set of issues. See how he's called Brian category? This is just a label. He's not sold on what that means. Do we have any strong contenders here? So here's an example of an executive level ask. Look at the sense of urgency around doing this, yet why isn't this knowable? Why isn't it knowable that IQVIA needs one viewpoint of all this stuff? What are all these other people working on that's so damned important that they're not working on this one integrated thing? How do they build this one integrated thing? So the point is the situation that our client is running into and the things that I have to produce are exactly the situation that we're running into. Why are we not learning from our own challenges? How do we get curious to say, this is a disruptive event. What can we do differently? How would we produce something like this? Now, I'm not asking you to do that. Here's my ask. So what can you do? What can you do to help get in the zone so we can produce things like this? Well, what is your mission? So going back to the, I'm assuming that you've watched the operating model. We have an operating model, or we're trying to install an operating model. What is your, if you're a business within a business, what's your mission? And based on your mission, what criteria do we need to do in order to make what you're doing tangible? How will each of these roles to react to what to share? Can you capture what they are thinking so you can understand how to meet them where they are? Note, this is easier than you think. Just take inventory of all the assumptions you've made and all of the ahas you've had. If you just do that simple thing and put it down to paper, I can't stress enough of how valuable that would be. So next thing that you would have to do is, how would you explain to Karina and Bernd, these are VPs of sales, how to manage expectations about what we've learned? Keep in mind, pilot, limited production run or preparation stage, and scale. We're going to talk to them about scale. How do you manage their expectations about scaling? Do we just say buy a platform? We don't have a completed platform, do we? Do we say, oh, do more detanglers? Oh, make things more clear? Are we just throwing things out? How do we explain to them what the formula for success is? How do we have the discipline to say, this is the prototype message? Who should be rolling it out, and how do we roll it out, and how do we create criteria with which to be successful? How do we evaluate that, and how do we expand out of who else needs to happen, and then so on and so forth? This is the root core question that we can be working on. What are your points of view? And if you give me points of view, aka toast, slides, etc., based on what's in your mind's eye, based on your gut reactions, based on what you think of when you think capability, or when you think clarity, or when you think of detangler, or when you think of conceptor, or when you think of architect, guess what? I can take all of those pieces together and assemble them. And we can share what we've learned together, and now we have a foundation to build from. Can you make lists of criteria for how to evaluate what the difference is between prototype stage and, say, preparation stage? What would your criteria be? And I want you to be biased through the lens of architect, through the lens of capability, and then share your criteria with everybody else. with the whole idea of does it make sense? So here's an example. Clarity. What is your mission and how do you add value to me? I am your client. Clarity. What specifically are you making clear? What does clarity as a service mean tangibly to me? What do I want to get? Clarity. How would you explain to Karina and Bernd how to manage expectations about introducing what we've learned? Clarity. Can you make an outline based on the storyboard I shared with Jen and Matt a few weeks ago? Can you develop a scorecard to judge the clarity of each part? Clarity. How would you create a scorecard about what's clear? If the overall project is too complex, break down just this video and say, how would you make the sections of this video clear? Where was I clear? Where was I not clear? How do we start introducing and using that tool to help others so that I know that I'm clear, and then we can hold accountable myself or you as the individual about whether or not the assignments are being articulated and if people are performing and we're doing the things that we need to do to add value to IQVIA as a team. It starts with knowing your role and playing your position. How do we make this fun? For the rest of you, replace clarity and do it yourself. Maybe not so specific. You can take some creative license with some of these things, just like this message. Do you think that somebody at Jovan's level is asking for people to follow exactly what he's doing? Or is he saying, here's in my mind's eye, let me try to do the best I can do to articulate what my need is? And is he not publishing, I feel we don't have something here, so wouldn't it be valuable to at least be able to articulate what this gap is in the first paragraph? And then the second thing, do we have an elegant one-page articulation? Maybe we need to help him rework how to ask this, because I know that sometimes when I ask things like, why don't we? It puts people on the defensive, and I don't know what other way to ask that question. But the point is, what is he asking for? He's saying, I want an elegant. So we need to have criteria what elegance means, and we need to know what that means. Elegant is an intangible word. It's abstract. It creates ambiguity. We have to get good at knowing, hey, here's how we'll tackle an ambiguous assignment, elegant. Now, elegant is ambiguous. One page is specific. Ambiguous, specific. This creates confusion, doesn't it? It creates confusion for me. It creates confusion for you. Now I don't know what's expected of it, so I'm going to get freaked out. What am I going to produce? Blah, 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 blah. Of what do we do at a practical level of detail? So what does practical level mean? And detail, when you put that word in, it's going to mean different things to different people. If I produce it and somebody just says, oh, this is too detailed, could you do this? Then people are going to get frustrated because I didn't do the checkbox. And really, what's happening is all these other people are going off and this is just an assignment. So they're going to treat this like a task, like everything else, and try to get it off their plate. But really, this is a much bigger problem, because isn't this going to be a consistent problem across the board? How do we communicate across a room of commercial heads, franchise lead data informatics and analytic heads? They're communicating to an audience of among. This is among messaging, guys. So these are common patterns. These are the things that happen over and 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 over again. We have to break the pattern and lean into it and apply it. So this is the situation. This is a microcosm of the situation. I get requests like this constantly. I'm trying to balance, how do I filter that information to the team? Because right now, my sense of the team is, learning, struggling a little bit. There is some angst and some frustration. How do we keep that going? But really, we have to accelerate the agitation process. I need feedback from what's going on in people's heads way faster so I can respond to things like that. If you wait and wait and wait for the answer, you've missed the opportunity because they want to make decisions and move on more quickly. So these are sort of the variables here. So let me tie the dots. Let me complete the dots with what we worked on. So going back to the start, what is the relationship between story building and catalyzing change? So it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. In other words, I'm inviting you to say, well, I don't know that. How do I get curious? I provided you an example of a situation. I provided you an example of how to get curious about what it is, how to diagnose it, how to create tools. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. I know things to be a certain way. I need this information. You don't need that information. Are you sure you need that information? If you get curious, why am I reacting this way? What information do I have? Where can I start? What can I produce right now? How do I get curiosity going from my team? How do I get things down on paper? Those are the kinds of questions to ask, not what I don't have. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have time for this. I don't do. Those are all stinking thinkings. We talked about the Babylonians and ancient Egyptians or whatever. The whole model of a pharaoh or that structure became antiquated in just a short 50-year period of time. We talked about VUCA, or we talked about the pivot and change process and what is happening here in this mix. Well, there were 1200 to 1250 BC was the Bronze Age collapse. That was a lot of VUCA, a lot of rapid change, right? We talked about the emergence in the Iron Age world, and the ancient Greeks had this big span of control, and they had it for about 400 million years. A lot of us fixate on ancient Rome, but the Greeks were really this emergence out of this Bronze Age collapse. What was the trigger event for ancient Greece to become dominant? It's their culture, and it's their culture centered around that's best documented or codified into this story of the Iliad, which, the feature or iconic symbol of this is the Trojan horse. The Iliad is a story. The story is the foundation. And guess what? This was a prototype of the hero's journey. We've already learned about the hero's journey from Professor Campbell, different storytelling techniques and the things like that. But why was it so impactful? Why, thousands of years later, do we still know about the Trojan horse? And many of us still use the same things because human beings were forced to confront change and build something new out of nothing. And that's what we're doing in the prototype stage. We talked about that this has evolved over time through observation of repetition of what works is a storyboard element. We connected the storyboard element to the problem-solving cycle of the scientific method. Look how closely they're aligned. Look how similar they are. They're not wildly different. There's a reason why. The question is, the scientific method asks it more specifically, but you still need to combine it to be an entertaining or a curious thing. The question always starts from somebody being curious. That's the source of questions. If we don't focus on questions and being curious, we don't do any of this other work. So these correlate with each other. And guess what? We've also talked about how we're trying to approach design thinking. Design thinking is a technique used to solve complex problems. Part of what we have to do is we have to rewire our brains from linear thinking. If I just make slides, tell me how to make slides. That's linear thinking. It's not going to work. And what works is having a question and having an answer, and in between going through the journey. And the journey gets tough before it gets easy. Isn't this the hero journey in a microcosm? Yes, it is. We talked about expectations experience. This is the zone that we're in now, and why I need accelerated slides. I need accelerated slides because I'm having to manage the ambiguity. And as we get introduced to more and more stakeholders, the amount of expectation and anxiety is accelerating. People look to us for having the answer. We've done the work. Why won't we just document it? So what we do, the way that I'm breaking this down is there's C, solution, and scale. we have to concentrate first to help people, to create the tools to help people see so that we can manage expectations. If we control how they look at the world, then we can control their expectations, which means then we can drip out a solution, which means we can pace the scale. If we try to start here, we can't control expectations at all. This is 100% about controlling expectations to allow the experience to happen, to allow the pace of change to occur so that they can be successful. This isn't about us making slides or being heroes or giving them the right answer or, pontificating to them what they learn. It's about none of those things. And we have to show what we see. We have to show how we arrived at the solution. We have to show how they scale. These are all challenging things that we must do. We need to do them. We just have to practice putting them in a concrete format. That's why I laid out, there's a prototype stage, a preparation stage, and a scale stage. We highlighted that each stage has a beginning and an end and a part. So I expanded this just to try to do the prototype stage. How do we find a start date and an end date? Because what we're doing is I build a scaffolding around, and I think too many people are focused on the window instead of the scaffolding, and that we have to do a lot of work. And it looks messy from the outside, but what's happening on the inside is transformation. We need to learn how to articulate this, because who's going to put the scaffolding up for a period of time? So we have to make what's happening in here more visible, and right now it's too opaque. So how can we learn to do that? We can learn to do that by documenting things. There are 4 examples that I'm a repeating broken record on. The reason I'm a repeating broken record on it, I'm trying to help highlight that there are common patterns. And instead of just responding to events as they are, if you are doing your criteria work and you're making observations and putting into buckets, you're going to see the same patterns. And patterns are empowering because it allows us to apply the 80-20 rule. If not, we're just scurrying around and doing stuff, and we're not being thoughtful humans. So we have examples of things we can learn from. There's the software AG example that only Brian and I can do. Just takes curiosity. What is the software AG? When did it start? When did it end? What happened in between? This is an interview. You can just interview me and you can interview Brian. Very simple. Get very curious about what happened when. There's the Sales Enablement Society, different phases of it. All of us can do it. There's lots of evidence around. But how did it happen? What happened at the beginning? What happened at the end? What happened in between? Why? Why are these things so elusive when they are knowable? You can interview people who did it. And you can be curious. What is preventing us from doing that? It's a lack of curiosity. Same thing about, these are things that have been incomplete. So OmniTrack second day workshop, Brian, Walter, myself. Why was it so hard for us to get a readout done? Or the exercise, what actually does change mean? We have 4 examples that repeat this cycle that we can model out so that we have foundation to build from, and we can accelerate that process. To make an example, we said, here's a prototype. This is what Dustin took him 8 months. Then he sent it to this other guy and challenged this other guy. Look how long their videos are, 758, 707. Now, of course, there was a lot of work. It probably took them a few months to put together, to edit this out and everything like that. And it takes skill and things like that. Let's not focus on the time form, except that there's work involved to get this done. The thing to focus in on is, what actually is he doing? And I'm going to say that it's pretty easy. Well, I think it's a lot easier to say, let me figure out if I can do it. But what does this guy know? This guy knows it can be done because he did it. That's the whole purpose of a prototype stage in the first place, is to prove certain things resonate or certain things work. So therefore, it's now, how do we repeat it? Everybody wants to skip this part, but we have to build the formula so that we can show people that writing the backwards right is possible. Then because it's possible, then we have to go create the pattern of how to make it repeatable. And then give clients the path of what they can follow so that they can ride the backwards bike. So we went through that video together. Then I said, hey, let's go through this. Here's some structure. I'd love somebody else to come up with their own structure to observe what's happening. This is too hard for me because I'm in the zone of trying to think building the prototype, but this is limited production run. This is the prepare stage. So I can't, it's like performing brain surgery on myself. So this is just a representative example to start fleshing it out. Be the other guy, be this guy and figure out what's happened. But there's toasting, collecting, agitate, structure, deliver. Why do I stress so much agitation? So maybe as an idea, you can use these things. If you want to have a template to work from and figure out whether or not you're ready to tackle the 4 examples that I shared, use these. They're self-contained. In 758, you can plot out everything. Or in 707, you can plot out everything, or you can do both. And then once you have that foundation and change the labels, and then we agree that that'll work, then you can go back and redo the other thing. But we got to start somewhere. And you have to go end to end. You can't just do it in piecemeal. So we talked about the situation. I'm looking for feedback on how to share situations better. I went through a specific example. I highlighted what the request is for me. How do you think I took that? What anxiety does this create for me? What anxiety or what am I managing in terms of the value proposition for all of the growth enablement team whom Jen has met? What contributions am I articulating that you guys are producing? I've highlighted for you, for my team, many times, video reactions about how you're actually reacting to the situation and having examples that you're responding to are very valuable for me. Slides for slide's sake and critiquing your work is me being in service of you, not the other way around. So I think it's interesting to just sort of think through. I'm really asking you to think about what value means. And by going through that process and sharing that with me helps me immensely because I can help anticipate what I need to do to produce in the prototype stage. If you don't do that and try to produce what you think I want, we're not adding value to each other. This is a process. But I'm doing my part to try to say, I'm trying to communicate what the situation is. I laid this out. I broke down and examined this as the way that I see it. How would you break it down? Then I provided some examples of what you can do, or some asks of what you can do. Now, you can rearrange these things. If you have your own criteria, how you add value, redo these things. But I shouldn't be giving you criteria of how you add value. By this point in time, I should be able to expect, this is a prototype, right? So don't freak out, but I should be able to expect that you have been working at what your role is and how your service, what service that you're providing in terms of the operating model. And that you have clear criteria of how you add value and don't add value, rather than just doing things. So you should, I would expect at this point in time, next time, like when we work on Mindcast, that you're able to come up with your own set of what you can do based on criteria of what your value contribution is. I gave examples. How are you fleshing this out? How are you making it concrete? The process of making this concrete and writing it down helps us all. And then, what you can do the rest. So I summarized all this. Hopefully this ties together. Hopefully this conundrum creates a lot of questions and helps us fuel the curiosity to keep making things so that we move the ball forward. We do have to confront the sense of urgency. We do have to create conflict. And the reason that we have to create conflict is because all of us have biases. And until we fall off those bikes and get frustrated and kick the bike itself, then we can do that. Once we start blaming others, then we're no longer being helpful. And then you're not that you're actually negatively contributing to the team. It is perfectly okay to be frustrated. It is not okay to not be curious. It is not okay to to expect things without being curious. It's not okay to expect things without documenting it, because all we're doing is kicking the can down the road. And the root problem that we've got is balancing managing expectations with being clear so we can manage everybody's anxiety levels. And that's what it comes down to. You should have a lot of empathy for that because your anxiety levels are probably pretty high. You need to ask yourself why that's the case. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to your feedback. Take care.